In New York, silence is rare. Sirens, footsteps, and voices spilling from every corner of the streets. Every building hums with life, arguments behind thin walls, laughter drifting through stairwells, televisions glowing in the night, and the sounds of children playing. But in one building, on one busy block, there is a door that never opens. Apartment 6B, or, as the neighbours called it, Apartment Eerie. Tenants come and go, families move in and out, but 6B remains untouched. No furniture, no tenant, no light in its window. It waits year after year, as if the city itself has agreed to leave it alone. And yet, on the longest night, when the city froze in winter silence, 6B dripped for the first time. As typical for this time of year, the building was alive with holiday noise. Laughter spilling from apartments, Bluetooth speakers humming carols, footsteps echoing up and down the stairwells. But in apartment 6B, there was only silence. Then, ever so faintly, a soft sound. Not music, not voices, but a steady drip, drip, drip. Occasionally, a passing tenant would press their ear to the door, swearing they heard water dripping somewhere deep inside. Yet, when the landlord checked, the pipes were dry. The apartment was spotless, empty. Still, the faint dripping continued, on through the longest night of the year. As winter lingered, the city fought the cold, with candles in windows, lamps burning late into the night. In the stairwell outside apartment 6B, tenants began to hear something new. At first, it was only the faint hum of the building, pipes, vents, the shuffle of neighbours. But then, beneath it, a whisper. Not words, not yet, just the suggestion of a voice, rising and falling like breath. Some dismissed it as imagination, the tricks of a tired mind in the dead of winter. Others pressed their ears to the door, swearing they heard syllables forming, as though the apartment itself was trying to speak. The landlord checked again. The room was empty, spotless, cold. But the whispers continued, threading through the silence, only in the nights around Imbolc. Eventually spring returned and the city thawed. The stairwells filled with the sounds of children chasing each other, their laughter echoing through the halls. But near apartment 6B, the laughter faltered. More than one child swore they heard their names spoken from behind the locked door. A soft voice, patient, waiting. Parents dismissed it as overactive imaginations, the tricks of tired ears in a noisy building. It was spring after all, and everyone was restless, stir-crazy from the long winter. But the children refused to pass 6B alone. They clutched the railings, hurried their steps, and whispered to each other that the apartment knew them. Again, the landlord checked. The room was empty, spotless, cold, not even dust had settled. It was simply vacant. Yet the names continued, whispered only on nights of the equinox, when day and night stood in perfect balance. As spring unfolded, May arrived, and the city burned with energy. Couples lingered on stoops, music spilled from open windows, and the air carried the restless heat of early summer. But in apartment 6B, the silence deepened. One evening, a tenant climbing the stairwell stopped short. The door to 6B was not shut. It stood ever so slightly ajar, only just enough to show the darkness inside. Curiosity pulled them closer. The air that drifted out was colder than the hallway, colder even than the night outside. Inside, the apartment was as it had always been, spotless, empty, untouched. Yet the silence was heavier now, pressing against the walls like a held breath, waiting. The tenant backed away, heart pounding, and pulled the door closed. But by morning, it was ajar again, and again the next night. Always on Beltane, when fires were lit across the city, 6B opened its own threshold, but never more than a crack. Summer arrived, and the city blazed beneath the longest day of the year. The streets shimmered with heat, rooftops glowed, and every apartment window spilled light into the night. Every window, except one. Apartment 6B remained dark, but tenants swore that when they passed its door, shadows moved inside. Flickers, brief and sharp, like figures shifting against the walls. Some claimed they saw the outline of a person standing just beyond the threshold. Others said the shadows multiplied, stretching across the floor as though the room were crowded. Yet when the landlord checked again, the apartment was empty, spotless, cold. No dust, no furniture, no light. Only silence. Still, on the solstice, when the city burned with sunlight, shadows uneasily danced inside 6B. August came, and the city sweltered. Markets overflowed with fruit, bakeries filled the air with the smell of bread, and neighbours carried groceries up the stairwells. But outside apartment 6B, nothing stayed. Delivery workers refused to leave packages at its door. Those who did found them gone by morning. Groceries vanished, letters disappeared. Even a child's toy left behind was never seen again. Tenants whispered that the apartment was taking offerings, swallowing whatever touched its threshold. Some claimed they heard the faint scrape of movement inside, as though unseen hands were collecting what was left. As the heat of summer finally subsided, autumn arrived and the city shifted. Leaves gathered in gutters, the air cooled, and the stairwells filled with the smell of damp coats and tired commuters. But outside apartment 6B, the tension had grown too heavy to ignore. Tenants gathered in the hallway, whispering about the dripping, the voices, the shadows, the vanished packages. They demanded answers. The landlord, pale and weary, finally spoke. "I've shown that apartment dozens of times," he admitted. "Every tenant leaves. They all hear something, and none of them ever come back." Silence followed his words, heavier than the stairwell itself. The neighbours looked at the door, its paint unchipped, its lock unbroken, and felt the weight of something waiting inside. On the equinox, when day and night balanced for the last time, apartment 6B tipped the scales. October fell, and the city braced for winter. Pumpkins lined stoops, candles flickered in windows, and children dressed in costumes filled the stairwells with laughter. But outside apartment 6B, no one lingered. On the night of Samhain, when the veil between worlds was said to be thinnest, the door that had only cracked open until now swung wide, slow and deliberate, revealing the darkness inside. No hand touched the knob. No tenant dared approach. For a single heartbeat, the apartment was not empty. Shadows pressed against the walls, figures crowded the floor, pale faces twisted. Some whispered names, others laughed softly. The hallway lights flickered, and the tenants froze, watching the room. The figures multiplied, pressing closer, waiting. Then, all at once, the lights went out. The stairwell plunged into silence. From somewhere deep inside, the sound of dripping water. The lights never returned. When dawn came, the hallway was empty. Weeks passed. The story spread through the neighbourhood. People said something had happened in that building, though no one could agree on what. Some swore they remembered screams. Others claimed they saw dozens of figures pressed against the windows. But the details slipped away, as if the memory itself had been erased. Still, when strangers walk by on the street, they sometimes hear it, a whisper, a name, or just a single drop of water echoing from somewhere deep inside the walls. And the landlord was sometimes seen, sweeping the steps, grinning faintly, as though he were preparing it for what comes next.